Here we go. I'm live. Hello. So I'm just waiting for Nancy to join. I'm just looking at my eyes. I'm like, dang, serious dark eye circle thing happening there. I'm hoping that my headphones have also kicked in. How is everyone? How are you doing? I'm really excited to do this Instagram live simply because I want to answer your questions. I get so many questions about, becoming an aspiring psychologist and, what is it you need? And yeah, all of the questions really. So I'm hoping that this will be a chance for you to ask any questions, for those questions to be answered. And I'm just waiting for my dear Nancy to join. Hello, welcome. How is everyone's evenings going? I am so done with lockdown and I'm so done with homeschooling. Done. Okay, so we're just waiting for Nancy to join. Okay, so I'm just waiting for you, Nancy. Do you need to request to join? I think, if I remember, unless they've changed it again. I'm hoping it works anyway. If anyone knows. Hey, Teen, you okay? Oh. Hello, Canada. That's so nice. Okay, I've got some great questions already, so I will have a look at them in a minute. Here we go. And we are doing... We're going to hopefully get Nancy to join. It's the waiting. Okay, I can hear you, Nancy. Hey! Hey, lovely. Could you hear me? She can't hear me. Hello. Yeah, I think the line's not like 100%,
right,
but we'll try our best.
Hey, Dane.
You got love straight away there. I didn't get any love. Oh man. So good. Oh, come on. Come on. Connection. I might have to... It's gone to Robot World. I think so. Come on, come back from Robot World, Nancy.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Or is it still robotic?
Yeah,
or
it's like...
am I there? Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to...
Let me kick off and come back in again and see whether or not that
Yeah,
makes a difference.
let's try that. Okay. Ah, thanks, Links. Okay, so while we're waiting for Nancy to join, I might as well talk because, I might as well kill some time. We've had some really interesting questions come through, and I'll just get Nancy back in again. Most of them are relevant to UK
Okay.
psychology training. I was just saying to people who are listening that most of the questions we've had are to do with like UK training. I've had one or two that have come for like international questions. So just need to put it out there that me and Nancy are both UK trained psychologists. So we can't really comment on, any sort of psychology training abroad. It's hard to say, isn't it? We don't know how it works out there. But yeah, that's all I can say really. I mean, I think maybe one of the things that we do try to do is get other psychologists from abroad and start speaking to them. I think that would be quite a good idea too for a future Instagram live.
I agree. And LinkedIn is a great resource for that as well, if people want to independently seek out other psychologists. So connect with people on LinkedIn, ask them what's the training route, or think about whatever the governing body is for psychologists within that country. And they should have some guidance on their website or, that might be a good starting point. Awesome. How are you, Tina?
Oh man, I'm good. I know. I was just staring at my dark circles. I was like, oh my, seriously, I just need sleep or something.
This is the
something, or
first time I've worn
concealer.
makeup in the longest time, so I'm not even going to say
Oh,
anything.
but you're looking beautiful, by the way.
Thank
You look
you.
absolutely lovely.
I'm
So,
following the
so
lead.
let's talk about you first and your page, because we came across we came across each other via Instagram, and we did a
An
ticketed
event. Yeah.
event together, which was brilliant. But I would like everyone to know who you are and what you're about and what your page is about.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I'm Nancy Encia. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I trained at Surrey. And I've always been keen on thinking about how can just psychology be more accessible, as a service, but also more accessible as a profession. And I didn't get to see my first Black clinical psychologist until I was in my second or third year of training. And I just thought about how difficult it was prior to that moment to really envisage myself in the profession. I was told when I first started to kind of think about it, there's no Black clinical psychologist, or it's too competitive, or all of those things, which when you tell a rebel like me, I'm just like, that just gives me more drive to want to kind of overcome that. But it felt like a very lonely journey. And so having gone through training, come through the other side, etc., I was really keen on trying to help connect those experiences, to help people from Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups to be able to see themselves in the profession, to know that we are needed in the profession. And one way I wanted to do that was to start a mentoring service. So there's kind of 3 components to the mentoring service, which is full, by the way, please. Sorry, I don't want to set expectations and then have to dash them. At the moment, they're full. But there's 3 components. One is about kind of skills building, helping people to learn the skills that are required within the profession, whether it's about kind of reflecting, thinking about drawing on theories and models. And the other one's about connecting people. So it's a group model based where you're able to kind of form alliances with other people who are on the same journey. And everybody is paired with a clinical psychologist from a Black or Asian minority ethnicity. The reasons for that, which is slightly different from other mentoring services, is I want people to be able to ask the real questions of, what was it like being the only Black or brown person in the room? Like, did you ever have to face discrimination? How did you navigate that? Were there times when you were able to talk about faith or those aspects of your upbringing, or were they muted, were they put aside? Wanting people to have unfiltered conversations. So the third part of the mentoring service is around having those conversations kind of more broadly. And that's where Tina, linked in with Tina, and we talked about faith. Like, we do not talk about faith that enough. And it is something that can really shape people's experiences, how they make sense of it. And during training, we didn't talk about faith a lot, except for within the framework of psychosis, which is really interesting in and of itself. And so we got a group of clinical psychologists from minority backgrounds to just talk about what faith meant to them or to their communities, or how to bring that into the profession, and also to be bold and bring it into your interviews, into your application forms, to be authentically yourself. And so that's where I met Tina. I mean, by virtue of her being called the brown psychologist, I was like, I need to connect. I need to find out.
Owning it,
So,
yeah.
yeah, no, but it was lovely kind of doing that project with you though.
Yeah, awesome. So I reached out to you, Nancy, because I have been inundated with lots of questions. Always get kind of questions in my DMs about, how do I get onto psychology? What is it I need to do to get to a place, even just to get in a first assistant post. And I'm constantly like, oh, I need to get back to you on this, or, and then I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to do a live. I'm just going to do a live with somebody who I know knows their stuff. And who better than Nancy?
No pressure.
No pressure.
We're gonna figure it out together. But yeah.
Well, I just want to say to anybody who isn't following Nancy, follow Nancy. Her posts are on point, because the things that you address are exactly the things that we are starting to feel comfortable to talk about. Now, if this was around, 15 years ago, for me, it would have saved me a lot of grief. It would have saved me so much torment. And, you go through, I mean, you probably went through the same thing, but just this sense of, I'm not enough for this. I don't fit here. I don't belong here. It's all of that, right? And it's all that kind of, like you said, muting yourself. And that's exactly what it felt like. I constantly felt like I was muting myself. but that's done now. And what I love is that you're all about helping the aspiring psychologists, the next generation of psychologists, the generation of psychologists that could be potentially supporting my kids. This
Yes.
is what it's about.
Yes, absolutely. I'm here for that. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
offer what I wish I would have had on my journey and how that would have challenged imposter syndrome, the sense of am I meant to be there? So
Yes.
yeah, definitely
Brilliant.
resources.
Okay, so let's get stuck in with the questions then. So the
Mm.
first question, and a general question that I tend to get, is how to get work experience after university. Is there a specific type of experience you need?
So I guess I was thinking about this question, and it's really interesting because most of my experience was when I was actually on my undergraduate degree. I was
Mm,
quite creative and inventive. So first, when we're kind of framing work experience, is thinking about what jobs or opportunities help to give you skills to get onto the course or to be able to understand the way a clinical psychologist works and thinks. And often when you think about it, a lot of people kind of go to assistant psychologist. That is considered the gold standard of jobs. You can have 10 assistant psychology jobs and still not get onto the course. And so it really is about having the jobs that offer you an opportunity to really get one, to connect with the client groups that psychologists will work with. So people who might be experiencing any sort of mental distress, or who might be kind of accessing psychological support, or even physical health, because our physical health connects to our mental health as well. So when you're thinking about kind of care work, for example, healthcare support workers, if you're thinking about even as a teaching assistant in kind of a school for people with learning difficulties, if you're thinking about the role I took, independent mental health advocate. So not many people know about that, but that is a role that legally by law, so they can never shut that job down. By law, you are required to offer this role to people who have been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. So you get trained up to become aware of the Mental Health Act, and you
mm,
get day-to-day liaison with people who are under section, and you get to really understand their experiences and their journey. So the reason why I kind of emphasize alternative experiences, not just assistant psychologists, because one, there's less competition. So you're kind of being smart about that. But
mhm,
equally, it's about the richness of the experiences. So it is about what skills, competencies, qualities do clinical psychologists have that I can try and tap into in these different professions, in these different roles. So as an independent mental health advocate, I was having to advocate for people. I was having to attend care planning meetings. I was having to learn about the mental health system. I was learning firsthand about what it's like for somebody who isn't under significant distress to come through a crisis route. And who predominantly comes through crisis routes is people from Black and Asian and Caribbean backgrounds. So for me, this was like the front line. I wasn't doing clinical work in the sense of therapy as we know it, but I was connecting to stories. And so if you're able to kind of connect to people who have had those experiences and really have an understanding, active listening, all these skills allow you to really connect to what a psychologist does. And it's how you reflect on that and how you sell that in your application form to be like, I know psychologists do this, and I've had a bit of a taster in this role, and this is how I would build on it. So it is really important to be able to think quite broadly and flexibly about roles. I did a little exercise, and I asked a group of training clinical psychologists who are from minority backgrounds, what jobs did they get before they got onto the course
mm.
that were non-traditional routes? And I can read out a couple of them.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So independent mental health advocate, independent mental capacity advocate, so that tends to work with more issues around capacity and
Hmm.
people with learning difficulties, etc.
Hmm.
Teaching assistant, healthcare assistant, family worker, key worker in a probation hostel for sex offenders, community development worker, smoking cessation worker, victim support volunteer. I hope you're catching this because this is like goes so fast, but all these roles: behavior support worker, applied
Yes.
behavioral analysis tutor, relief support worker, youth worker, star worker, support time and recovery worker.
Yes. Yes. Heard of
um
them.
yes Also, of course, psychological wellbeing practitioner, child wellbeing practitioner.
Mm.
So I guess the idea is that there could be a broad range of jobs that you can do that can translate and show that you have transferable skills that make you a good candidate for clinical psychology.
And you know, it just makes you realize that there are so many roles out there that you can do.
Yes.
Literally, I'm actually really impressed by the options that are out there. So, you know, don't feel any way that it's just assistant psychologist and that's
Yeah.
it. Because
Yeah.
I think this comes from the idea of how it was. The how it was a very sort of straightforward route. And I went in through a very straightforward route. And that, and it, like you said, Nancy, though, it starts from your as soon as you're able to work or as soon as you're able to volunteer. So as soon as I was able
Mm.
to volunteer at university, I was doing like projects with young people.
Yes.
I did some other I did some loads of like voluntary kind of like support worky type roles.
Hmm.
Um, and then during the summer holidays, I was doing special education needs assistant
Hmm.
roles. I even actually got a job at the BPS just filing
Oh,
paper.
wow.
That was an experience.
Yeah.
So it's really about trying to get as close to caring mental health roles as possible. So do not feel like it's limited to just being an assistant psychologist, because I don't think
Absolutely.
that is, you know, the only way. So I hope
No.
that answers everybody's question. You've got anything else you wanted to add, Nancy, to that?
So most of the roles that I read out are paid, which was important to me because
Oh
I was just
yeah.
like, I don't have money for a master's. I wanted to be able to jump in and I wanted to have a job that was rewarding financially as well as through the opportunities it provided me. So if for you, this is something I finished my degree, I really want to jump in, what can I do? Those roles offer kind of paid opportunities. And even within those roles, some of those roles, you can actually work up within them. So it's
Mm,
not like, oh gosh, clinical psychology is my only focus. Really try and think about experiences that make you happy as well. If you're doing care work and it really isn't for you, it's not by force, as my mom will say, it's not by force, okay? Just try and find something that you know you enjoy, but that also kind of enriches your experience. And a key tip might be to have a Google search of what the competencies are for a clinical psychologist or competencies of training clinical psychologists. I'm going to do a series of posts on that. But if you're able to think about what the competencies are, you can look for, am I getting that in this role? Whereabouts in
mm,
this role am I getting a bit of teaching opportunity? Whereabouts am I kind of doing a bit of audits or service evaluations or being able to speak to people and think about empathy and active listening? So definitely look for how they map on to the professional skills that you need as a clinical psychologist.
brilliant, brilliant. Okay, so the next question is, how does it differ from psychotherapy? So I'm guessing, how does clinical psychology differ from psychotherapy?
I was thinking about this question, and I've always understood psychotherapy as like an umbrella term to think about kind
Mm.
of lots of different types of therapy, and then clinical psychology being a specific one. I don't know if that's your understanding or if you held a slightly different.
See, the way that I make sense of what is a psychotherapist versus a clinical psychologist, and this is where it starts getting me, is the training routes.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
in order to become a clinical psychologist, you'd need to do the undergrad
Hmm.
degree, uh,
Hmm.
you know, bachelor's in psychology. Then you'd need to do a master's and then the doctorate. That's kind of like the clinical psychology training route. Psychotherapy, I think it's about it's usually a 4 year full-time course, I think,
Hmm.
full-time or part-time course, and it is specifically within a particular modality of therapy. So
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
that could be systemic, you know,
Hmm.
family therapy. It could be psychodynamic
Hmm.
psychotherapy. That's kind of what I when I look at, you know, becoming a psychotherapist, that's what it looks like. But I also know many clinical psychologists who then
Your
go
course
on
yourself.
to
Mhm.
train in that specific like
Yeah,
therapeutic model. So you can be called a clinical psychologist and
and
psychotherapist. So
psychotherapist. Yeah,
it confuses things. But I think that the main thing is you're a specialist, like you really, really know this particular model
yes,
it at a depth, yeah, at a
yeah.
depth. That's how
And
I sort of make sense of
and
it.
as clinical psychologists, we learn more than one model, and we'll draw on
Exactly.
multiple models as we're training. So I
Yeah.
guess that being kind of one of the key and the level in terms of the intervention point. You know, people usually have to be quite significantly unwell before they see a clinical psychologist. So yeah, those being kind of the differences. But yeah, tricky question. There's so many terms that get thrown around: counselor, psychotherapist, etc., and the nuances between them. I think it's really helpful to ask people who have trained in those things, who identify as that label, because they'll be able to better articulate what that was like for them.
Absolutely.
And how they got to that role, and how that role might be different. Even when you search for jobs, there are some jobs that will be like clinical psychologist / counselling psychologist / i.e. the same role that they're open to multiple people from different professions coming into. And you know, that probably highlights that, you know, clinical psychology is not the only profession out there where you can do that level of work and connect to it. So it's about what makes clinical psychology different. Why do I want to be a clinical psychologist as opposed to training only in one model? Or is there something about the doctor title which helped me in my community, for real? I'm not gonna front. Ended up getting seats at tables that I never knew existed, being like, oh, please, doctor. I'm like, okay, right, never knew before. But the fact that it's a free training course, you know, they pay you. Like
that, I think that's the biggest thing. Like for me, I don't think I could have pursued psychotherapy or any other paid I just couldn't afford it. I came from a working class background, you know, single parent and all that, you know, so it just wasn't going to happen. I couldn't afford to do a master's like yourself, so it had to be paid. And I did put all my eggs in one basket, and you know, I do now think, gosh, if I hadn't got on, what would I have done?
Right?
And I genuinely don't know. You know, I genuinely don't know.
Did you go into your undergrad knowing that you wanted to be a clinical psychologist?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, I was one of those children, those weird children. I knew when I was 16, this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So it was,
Yeah, I definitely matched that in the sense of that's when I received the first talk around the different professions you could go into. And before that, it was medicine, and that was the route that kind of family were pushing me to do. And I was like, I don't like touching people, so that's not then it was forensic science, and I was just like, but they wear those outfits, and that's not going to work out. So I was just like, where can I fit? What can I do? How can I actually connect with people in a way that I find enjoyable, not just doing what my family were kind of encouraging me to do in their understanding. And there was no psychology framework in my community in the sense of, oh yeah, psychology is a viable profession. No, this is something I had to seek out. So yeah, being quite directed and focused and saying this is the job that you want to do, it can be a bit scary, because it's like all eggs in one basket. And I appreciate that some people try multiple times to get on, and I applaud their resilience and their drive. I don't know if I could have done that. I might have been tired by that. Yeah, but it does take a level of resilience, especially when you hear so many negative stories about how hard people have tried, how many years that they've applied, and rejection stories and barriers and what have you. But as with any profession, there's going to be ups and downs on that journey. So yeah, really connecting and staying connected to your why. Why do you want it to be in that profession? I think is really helpful.
Yeah, it does. It keeps you going, doesn't it?
For sure.
Okay, so I just want to try and zip through as many of these questions as possible. So next question we've got is, okay, so it's something around managing personal and professional life as a psychologist. And they've put in brackets child psychologists in particular. So I'm wondering whether the question is about like how do we maintain sort of boundaries between our kind of clinical work and our lives. Now I'm not a child psychologist. You work in peds,
I work in pediatrics, so yeah, I work with kids who have physical health conditions.
I mean, what's that like?
Before I had a child, it was okay. Now I have a child, oh God. Like you really kind of connect with these parent stories in a very different way. I mean, as psychologists, we deal with humans and we deal with human experiences, and that means we're not immune from that. In fact, we are human, and I think a lot of psychologists can sometimes forget that. The very human experience is not something that's that we're so disconnected from. If anything, it's really helpful for us to connect into that so we can empathize and to help make sense of people's stories and journeys. So yes, it is really important to be mindful of those boundaries. So for example, even right down to if there's a child that I've been working with and they pass away, I won't be the psychologist that helps to facilitate the debrief because I'm too close to the case. And actually, I might want that support as well around helping to think about memories of that child, thinking about how we supported them as a child. And so it's lovely working in a big team where somebody else can help facilitate that and I can be a participant. We have supervision. I have my own personal practices around prayer and just being able to kind of connect with my family and my friends as a way of being able to really help put those boundaries in place. Do I forget about work the second I come home? No. Even more in lockdown? No, because my home is my desk, is my everything else. But it is, for me, it isn't a negative for me. It's something that kind of helps me to remember that I'm still connected to the work. If I felt hardened to that and felt I could just switch off easily, I might be a little bit worried about, oh, what's going on? Is that empathy fatigue? Is it what's going on? So yeah, managing those personal and professional boundaries can be a bit tricky at times. There'll be times when it's overlap. There's times when I've challenged my faith, being like, God, why are these children dying? Like, these are kids, because of the work that you're in. So yeah, some very real experiences and challenges, but one that's, I feel, such a privilege to be able to connect with people's story, for people to open up to you first time seeing you. I think that's such a privilege.
It is.
So I definitely enjoy it. How do you manage the boundaries?
Yeah, so I work with mainly adults. So I think for me, it's been extra hard during lockdown simply because, like you're sharing that constant space between work and home. I think for me, when you work with certain clients who stay with you, you have to somehow, and I'm a kind of physical person, so I need to somehow just move and kind of, get energy out, or just, try and distract myself or whatever. And that's where, clinical supervision is so powerful, and peer support is so powerful. And, when you're with your kids, you just engage with being with your kids, and it goes, and exactly, it's really about being present. And I think that one of the things that I've realized is how much you should listen to your inner intuition, and if you feel like something's playing in your mind, or a client is playing, you've got to explore that. You've got to not ignore that feeling, because that feeling's there for a reason, and that's where you have supervision. And that's where I would suggest anybody who's struggling with that sort of boundary issue is to take it to supervision. Definitely.
And the slight difference between supervision and therapy, so it isn't therapy for us, it's bringing the client as the focus, and therapy is about actually what is the impact on me, my personal life, what's going on for me. And that's a separate space, which I would encourage psychologists, clinical psychologists, any therapist to take.
Anyone. It's so powerful. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to just move on to the next question. My undergrad grades weren't great. What can I do to get into a master's program? I didn't do a master's, so I can't comment.
I didn't do master's either. I think it's helpful to kind of look at the entry requirements for masters. A lot of people who do get, for example, a low 2-1 or a 2-2, they tend to do a master's to help to boost up their academic points, so to speak. It allows you to have a little bit more practice, feel a little bit more familiar, and then the master's is very focused. So undergrad, you can kind of study a bit of everything in the world of psychology, and it's a little bit like, okay, where does the Bobo doll fit in with Maslow's? Like, you're just learning everything. Whereas a master's can be a little bit more focused. So a lot of people do like a master's in clinical psychology, or various masters that help them to be able to get more practice and skills with the academic aspects, writing papers or doing literature reviews, or so if that's what you're worried about, then definitely think about having a master's or doing a research assistant post. There are some courses that you don't necessarily have to get a high 2-1 or a first, but they will kind of stipulate what sort of things they would like. And so you can check on the courses websites for a little bit more detail on what you can do if you are worried about your grades. Equally, that worry could be mirrored in some people saying, I'm really worried I don't have much clinical experience. And so one thing I've become more familiar with in terms of the courses and I didn't really necessarily acknowledge that when I was in the course, but everybody's coming through different routes. So they're at different levels for different things. So you coming in, and I didn't have much clinical experience, but I had a lot of kind of client contact and I had a bit of research experience, etc. Some of the things I was like, this is brand new, but write this all down. And other people were like, oh, done this, I've been an assistant psychologist, I've been whatever. When there was other stuff coming up, they were writing furiously, and I was like, I done this, I can chill, etc. So the idea is that they want to kind of get everybody, they want to attend to everybody's needs, but there will be times on the course where you'll just be like, oh god, should I know this? Am I supposed to know this? That's why it's training. You don't have to know it, you're going to learn it. So definitely be compassionate towards yourself on that journey.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. Thank you. Okay, how many years of studying did you do to become a clinical psychologist? And another question that I just saw was, what was our journeys like? Do you want to fill people in on your journey?
So I did a undergraduate sandwich year course, which is in psychology, BSc. That was at Surrey. And so the sandwich year means I had a year placement. We had to find our own placement. I found a placement at a brain injury unit as an honorary, so unpaid assistant psychologist, unpaid clinical psychologist. And I negotiated within that placement. Maybe if we've got time later, I'll kind of highlight why, but negotiated within that placement to get another placement for one more day in that week. So I ended up doing a bit of writing some literature reviews to contribute to a book chapter, in addition to kind of the honorary assistant role. So once I finished, during that undergraduate, those 4 years undergraduate, I did care work to help pay me through uni. I did rape and sexual abuse support center telephone helpline, which was really good in kind of getting in contact with some kind of traumas and kind of hearing and listening to people's stories, but being able to contain and think about how I manage my own emotions relative to when other people are distressed, boundaries, supervision, etc. One thing I did is that I emailed the clinical psychology doctorate at Surrey whilst I was an undergraduate, and I asked any of the trainees would they like help with their research project in return for them to essentially mentor me. And one of the women, the person who kind of took up that offer, is still one of my mentors, and she's absolutely phenomenal. But it was a great way to connect, but also to see firsthand what's it like on training, and for her to speak candidly about it while she was on training, and to get a little bit more research experience and figure out what it's like when you're doing that research bit of the doctorate. So that's 4 years, plus I worked in an independent mental health advocate role for 2 years, and then I applied and got on. So that's 6. You can tell I don't do maths, but that's 6 years from beginning to end. What about you?
And then you did the 3-year doctorate, didn't you, on top of that? So that's...
Oh, yeah.
And 3-year doctorate. Don't forget that. So mine was fairly similar in that during my undergrad, I did loads of like bits of voluntary work and, this and that. And during the summer holidays, I did like paid work as like I said, like special education needs support worker. I did like support work for people with learning disabilities. So I did loads of jobs like that. And then obviously my famous job at the BPS filing. That was a great experience. And then after I did a very similar course to you. So I went to Cardiff University and I did a sandwich course there.
Yeah.
I specifically chose a sandwich course simply because I knew how important having experience was. So I ended up doing my placement. I did a split placement. So I did 2 days at a primary care service and I did 2 days at a child and adolescent service up in Nottingham, and that was a fabulous year. And then I got that experience, which was amazing. Then I left, got my degree, and it was applying for assistant psychologist jobs. And, back in 2005, that it was like gold dust in those days as well. It really was so hard to get a post. I ended up managing to get an interview for an assistant psychologist post in primary care up in Mansfield, and I'm from Leicester, so I used to do a 100-mile round trip every day. Yep, that was me. That was me. That was me. Because there were no jobs in Leicester at the time, so.
Wow.
You do what you got to do. And I got that job simply because I knew the language, the white papers, the terminology. I knew the kind of frameworks that they were talking about within primary care, about the stepped care model, all the things that like my supervisor during my placement was talking to me about. I got involved in some really interesting projects, like we did an audit around GP notes and the psychological needs of asylum seekers and refugees, which was like, oh my gosh, this is so epic, really, really interesting research. And similarly for CAMS, when Sure Start was thriving, I got to be part of Sure Start groups. So, if you get the opportunity to get experience of working within these services, please take every opportunity by the hands and just soak it up, read the papers that your supervisors tell you to, because it will come in handy. So that's how I got onto my first assistant post, and then I wanted to get some different experience, so then I moved to Birmingham and did a post within, it was quite a new service. It was actually a research post with a small clinical element in it. It was a drug and alcohol service within Birmingham, and we were part of a research team, so we were writing papers, but we were also doing this kind of like pilot project on supporting people who had drug and alcohol issues, who were interfaced with the criminal justice service. So really innovative service that was being developed then. So I did that for a while, and then I left that after a year and went to apply for a forensic unit role. It was just kind of like I was on a roll. And that was in a secure setting working with women. But literally a few days into that role, I got the phone call to say, would you like to come for an interview? So I applied in my second year, and I got on at that go. So I didn't actually apply for clinical training until my second year of getting the experience. And, luckily I got on. I think it was one of those things where it just happened.
With all that experience, like, we'd have to protest, because that is the richest, like, kind of journey I've heard in a long time. That sounds amazing.
This was back in the day, though, clearly.
She said it's back in the day.
I'm not going to tell you my age, but it was a long time ago. But even then, it was so competitive. So I remember when I went for my interview, and then the honorary assistant that was on placement at the job in Mansfield, she said, you do realize you fought off 200 applicants for your role. 2005, that was. So, I can imagine that the competition is just as fierce right now. And then I got on to the doctorate that year. So in 2008, I started the doctorate in clinical psychology and qualified in 2011. So from 2005 until 2011, that was the kind of journey. Well, 2001 until 2011 was the journey of becoming a clinical psychologist. So 10 years, pretty much, So it does take a long time.
It does.
But, I was going to say it's worth it. It is worth it, I think. It definitely is worth it. But I think there's a reason why it is like that. You have to have a broad understanding of mental health. It's not something that you can just roll into, as an undergrad. I do genuinely believe that the more you're able to hear people's stories, empathize, get those skills, get the language, get the understanding of how the system works, because that's a whole thing in itself, isn't it? The better equipped you will be. So, yeah.
It was just making me think about when people
go
on interviews. So I sit on one of the courses in their interview panels, and sometimes I'm really struck by, because people are so dedicated to wanting to get the experience, wanting to tick off, I did AP, I did this, I did that. that sometimes when they talk about mental health and well-being, it's from a very service kind of business model type. It's completely devoid of the human emotion and experience
Yes,
that you'll be
yes.
supporting. You have at times service users who are on the panel. You have clinical psychologists who might have some experiences through mental health services. You are going into a profession that's supporting people with mental health. If you are not talking about that human experience, you're just missing the aim of the whole profession. So not to get too caught up in the checklist of things that you've done, and to really think about the richness of the experience. What did you get from it? What did it make you curious around? What things would you like to be able to explore more in research? What were the injustices that you noticed? What were the kind of human experiences that were missed, that were muted, that required a little bit more unpicking? How did you do that? What skills and values did you draw on to be able to help you navigate those conversations? Those are the winning points that need to be just as well. So for that not to be forgotten. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a real skill in itself, isn't it? You know, to be able to do that deep reflection, because when you look at the form, you just see empty boxes and you're thinking, how am I going to fill this? So I've seen a good few applications in my time, and you feel like you need to be, using specific language. But I remember in my application, I remember talking about, dancing to Bhangra in my living room. That was my identity. That's part of who I am, And if I don't share that that's who I am, they're missing the whole point of inviting me to be a psychologist as well, that how dancing for pleasure is so helpful. Yeah.
Yes. How do you stand out as well in a sea of applications when you are writing
Exactly.
the same things as everybody else? What makes you you? What do you bring to the profession? There's already part of an application where you write down what you did between this year and this year. So that's not what those boxes are for. They're really about reflecting on those experiences. Reflecting is a fancy word to just kind of describe how you think about things quite flexibly in a curious way, and maybe think about what models might be able to help make sense of this. Or it's just, don't get caught up or scared of those words. It's just people trying to be bougie. That's all it is. But
That's it. That's what it is, isn't it? It's all fanciness. Okay, so let's have a look. Next question. Is a counselling qualification / career credible in the psychology circuit?
I was really struck by this question. I consider all things credible. And
Yeah.
I don't see how it wouldn't be credible. So I wasn't too sure whether or not the question was asking, would this help me to get onto the course? Or would I be looked down on if I did counselling as opposed to clinical psychology? I don't know. How did you make sense of that question?
See, for me, what I read was, could you use a counselling qualification in order to get into clinical psychology? And to answer the question, I did a 12 weeks counselling skills course when I was an assistant psychologist, and I got them to pay for that, which was amazing. Yeah, back in the day,
need
they
to
had
have words on
budgets.
how you're getting
They had
this funding.
They had budgets then. They were like, here, it's a pot of money. Would you like to go and do some training? I was like, yes, please. So yeah, if I don't know what it's like nowadays, but if you can get onto a course, and I think it was about 250 quid, okay, for some people that's a lot of money, but to get a qualification out of that, I think it was a certificate that I did at Leicester Uni, and it was like in the evening for a couple of hours. And it was amazing because you get to do proper counselling skills, the stuff that actually was replicated in the first month and a bit of the doctorate of clinical psychology.
Exactly.
So
yeah. I mean, to be honest, whenever anyone asks a question of, would this be helpful? All things are helpful if you think about how you can apply it. If you think about how might this be used in clinical psychology? Who might benefit from this? How can I use this skill? So when people kind of switch careers, so they've gone from being a teacher to being a clinical psychologist, we do teaching. They may be the people that will be best at pulling up engaging ways to be able to teach syllabuses, or maybe even being a clinical tutor on a course. It's really about, okay, sometimes people on the courses do not know what, they've got an idea around, these are the things that are helpful. If you've got a curveball experience, if you've got a curveball kind of profession, think about selling it. How do you sell it? in what ways does this enrich this clinical psychologist who will be now stepping in, being like, actually, I've got experience in this XYZ. Yeah, I think all things are valuable. You just need to think about how to apply it.
Absolutely. It's like there's so many psychologists who combine yoga and
Yes.
psychology. We've got somebody in a Facebook group who is a deep sea diver and combines that within psychology. It's next level.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I know someone who is well, shout out to Bianca. I know somebody who's a CBT therapist, and she also combines that with her personal training experience. So she's thinking about, listen, how many people have like picked up a biscuit and been like, oh God, I just ruined my whole diet. Da, da, da. So she's thinking about how we attend to that
Yes.
aspect. And the
Yeah.
most fascinating one I come across is a man who was a police officer who then turned into a clinical psychologist, and
Oh,
now he literally
wow.
goes on the beat with police officers to support people who've been called in for mental health crises, and has been able to
Oh,
reduce the
wow.
number of people that go in through crisis routes because he's using specialist skills on the front line. Don't let anybody tell you your skills are not relevant.
That
You need to
is,
tell them
that
like how
is,
it's relevant.
yes, that is so, so amazing, isn't it? It's brilliant what people can bring. And it's thinking outside the box and being brave enough to just say, you know what, this is important. Because at the end of
Absolutely.
the day, it's humans. As long as you're working with human and human
Exactly.
experiences, well, I say even that, but I also know people who are combining kind of, equine therapy and,
I was about to say,
psychology.
because I'm scared of animals, I don't like talking about them. But yeah, no, like, you've got the therapy dogs that come into hospital, etc. And you're just thinking
Mm.
about how you manage anxiety, and you can connect that to anxiety models, and you can think about, yeah, pets, their role. Listen, you could create a whole new brand of clinical psychology. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so let's just try and see if we've covered as many questions as we can. So that was prior experience. Yeah, experience again. That was a question about India and abroad. Okay, so what are the benefits of being an aspiring psychologist from another culture?
So many. Okay, so let's break this down. Number one, you are afforded a different lens to be able to look through the experiences. I love that I will have different questions that I'd be curious around from colleagues who have different experiences. So I'll be like, oh, and how does that? So, for example, if somebody is talking about, being really frustrated at kind of their parenting, I might be curious around what are the community or the grandparents perspective on that. Is that adding pressure to kind of this sense of, oh God, I'm not being a parent? Because I know about the importance of community and opinions of community within my community. So I'd be curious around those questions, which allows you to give people permission to share those assets and stories, which they might think ordinarily, oh, this might not be relevant, or oh no, I shouldn't bring that into therapy. But you allow people to really bring their whole selves by being curious. I think as well that helps me to be bolder. It helps me to be bolder in asking certain questions that aren't the traditional questions that you were taught in the very Eurocentric textbooks. So I'm not afraid to ask about faith, because I'm like, oh, I know faith is important to me. I know faith is important to a lot of communities. So yeah, it's not going to be something that I'm going to be really tentative around. What's the worst that can happen? Someone goes, nah, it's not relevant to me. Okay, cool, move on. I love as well that sometimes that moment of when someone comes in and they've got the shared ethnicity as you, and they see you and you just see
Yeah,
it's just
shoulders
like,
drop.
yeah, it's just like,
Yeah.
oh, it's absolutely lovely. Um, I in my community, I think there's value as well, because I'm able to bring mental health awareness into my community, and they can hear it from me. So there's something about kind of when other practitioners are stepping in, that the sense of, oh, do they get us? Do they understand? Do they
Mm,
know how?
mm.
Yeah, how does this fit with my faith framework? Or they're just talking about science, not about God, etc. And so when I'm able to kind of combine the two, there's something about people being better able to hear. So one of the reasons why I chose to go into pediatrics was that intersection between physical and mental health. So people might
Mm-hmm.
will very much talk about, oh, I've got a headache, oh, my back hurts, oh, I'm tired, but won't say stressed or anxious or any of those kind of things. So being able to work in a setting where someone's coming in for treatment for cancer, people wouldn't ordinarily think, I'm going to see a psychologist. But
No,
when you
no.
are allowed to give yourself permission to think about the intersection, your whole being, your physical, your mental, your spiritual, etc., and being able to take that into my community to be like, yeah, you can attend to all of those aspects. So if anything, you become an advocate for mental health within your community, but also within your professional circle, you become an advocate for culturally sensitive and practices. And that means also shaping services, not just you kind of passively taking on and doing the work. It's about actually training your colleagues and making them aware of different nuances within communities or different ways of asking and exploring. So I'm doing a lot of work with around anti-racism and anti-discriminatory practices, which I think is, really helpful coming from a minority background. What about you? What do you think about that?
Everything that you've just said, I would echo and, add to that. I don't obviously work within the NHS. I work for myself, private practice. I think culture is just beauty. You see, I think that for so long I've had to hide the fact that there are all these hidden things that happen to us, as kind of people of color. And now we're starting to bring it into the therapy room. And like you, I've been like, so how did, what do you think about all this George Floyd stuff? And I'm not afraid to name it and say, what's your thoughts on this? How is it affecting you? And it's funny because when you see clients that just all of a sudden sit up and like, should we be talking about this? Yes, we should. And it's about bringing religion. It's about bringing, kind of culture, popular culture. It's about bringing spirituality, if there's spirituality. It's bringing politics. It's about bringing it all into the room and not being afraid, because all of that does impact. Of course it does.
It impacts that individual. They don't just leave all of that outside because they come into the therapy room. How they've made sense of their experiences is all about context. So you be allowing people, one people thing that sometimes people forget is that as therapists, we hold a position of power. And if we're in the therapy room, and sometimes if we don't name those things, some people who are brand new to this might be like, I don't know if this is relevant. How many people will go to their GP and talk about their faith? You just assume it doesn't quite fit. So as a psychologist, you are setting the scene. You are saying it's okay to talk about that here by just asking the question. So definitely, I fully agree. And if you think about the ecological systems one, and you think about the child and everything around the child and the different systems, the family, culture, even policies, etc., you just realize how much influences that one individual. So why shouldn't we bring that in?
Exactly, 100% agree with that. And then obviously there's the John Burnham Grace's sort of framework as well, which is brilliant. That kind of covers so many things. They're my two faves, absolute faves. Okay, let's have a look. I think we've answered all those questions. I'm just going to have a quick look here. Oh my gosh, so many questions, people. This is amazing. How did you manage, if you experienced it, racism on training? Big one. I know, we haven't got really long at all. So how do we even?
Find your tribe. Find the people you connect with that you feel safe to be able to offload, to share. I had to have that position, that safety first, to be able to kind of unpick and to say, do I want to challenge this? How do I want to challenge this? Who do I want to challenge this with? And stepping into kind of brave conversation. So this idea of, people say it's a safe space, and, I encourage people to reframe that. It doesn't always feel safe. You might be worried about the backlash or about what people might say or how they might think of you, etc. But in you acknowledging bravery, you are taking a step that it might be risky, but that risk might pay off for other people who come through that training experience, through being able to heighten in your colleagues' awareness that actually that was a microaggression. That was something that wasn't sensitive to kind of cultural differences. So finding your tribes to offload, to be supported with, etc. If you've got a good supervisor or clinical tutor as well, that would be great. I definitely encourage within supervision with any supervisor you have, if you're able to do like a cultural genogram or something that allows you to start sharing those parts of yourself. It allows you to just be able to feel like you can unmute. So I was always very conscious of me being I'm very quite expressive, and I kind of just drop like colloquial kind of gone in, phrases, etc. here and there, etc.
Yeah.
And need to kind of box it all in. And that's what I love about children. Like, you can just kind of be a lot more free and creative and fun and what have you, working with them. But yeah, to be able to honor your authentic self and to enjoy your training experience as much as possible, I think it is important to think about how you protect yourself, but equally what things you want to stand up for. Yes, great, you got onto the course and you should be great. It's great you've got onto the course, but you worked for that place. It's not a sense of sit there, be quiet and dutifully kind of go through. It's okay to challenge and to be
I'm
critical.
so glad that, you know, you're saying these things, because, you know, when I was during my training, I couldn't name the things that I was experiencing. There was no language for it. There was just no
Yes.
space to even explore and examine it. And, you know, coming up to 10 years now post qualification, and it's like, oh my gosh,
Mm.
that's what happened to me. You know, you start to
Mm.
remember all those microaggressions, you start to remember feeling all those feelings. So for everybody who is on that journey, I'm just so happy that there's been this movement. There are psychologists out there that are putting words and experiences and even writing papers about this.
Yes.
You know, it's so, so important that
Mm.
you know, and there are amazing schemes out there, groups. I'm just going to try and name as many as I can. There's the collective Asian psychological therapists, is CAPT.
Mm.
There
Mm.
is
Black and Asian therapists
Black and
work.
Asian Therapist Network. Yes, there is. Oh,
There's a Sikh
I can't
one.
think.
Sikh. I can't remember.
Just gonna Google it now. You're like
I'm
me, brains
actually
like a sieve.
sure that they follow you, Tina, so people could just kind of
Okay, sorry. What I'll do,
socially
I
follow
will
this.
do, you know what I'll do? I will get a post up with all the resources. I'm sure I did one not so long ago, but we'll do a refreshed one. There are loads of spaces now where you can, you know, as an aspiring psychologist or a trainee psychologist, there are places where you can go and explore
Yes,
these expressions, these feelings. Yep, seek your mind. Thank you. There's
that's
so
it.
many places that will do it.
That's it.
Yes. So do not feel like you're alone in this. And, you know, reach out to us if you kind of want to get some guidance on where you need to go next. Okay, let me just check. We've got literally 3 minutes. Okay, I can't answer these questions quickly. So I'm going to see if I can save them. Well, I don't know. I'll have to try, see if that works. If you do have any more questions, you know, just send them in and we will try and answer them in a post or something between me and Nancy. I think we round it up here. I mean, thank you everyone for dropping your questions in. They've been brilliant. I wish we could, you know, answer all of them today, but we can't. You can find Nancy at
The art of being the art of being well. The art of being underscore well. I don't even know what. Yeah, the art of being underscore well.
brilliant.
But yeah,
And
I was just going to say I
sorry.
have posts on kind of application forms and models and different tips for interviews, etc. So yeah, hopefully you can find some useful resources. But I'm happy to think with Tina around doing another one if there's like another list of questions or in preparation for interviews or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that'll be brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we'll sign off. I will save this live. I do promise if I don't screw it up technologically, but I will try my best. Thank you everyone so much for joining. It's been a pleasure. Nancy, you're a star.
Lovely
And
seeing
I
you,
will catch
Tina.
up with you soon. All right then, everyone. Have a good
Bye,
evening. Take
everyone.
care. Bye.